presenting the newly restored Brick House and Shigeru Band Paper Log House, Thursday through Monday, April 15th through December 15th. Tickets at theglasshouse.org.
We all know people who can strike up a conversation with just about anyone. Journalist Charles Duhigg says there's a name for them, super communicators. His new book is about what makes conversations work and how we can be better at having them. How to be a super communicator, next time on 1A. Weekdays at 3 on 93.9 FM, AM 820, or live stream it at WNYC.org.
Marketplace Morning Report is coming up next, and then in 10 minutes at 9 o'clock, it's the BBC NewsHour on WNYC. Let's check in with London to see what they're working on. London, good morning.
Good morning, WNYC. I'm Tim Franks. On today's NewsHour, the Haitian Prime Minister resigns. The first aid ship to Gaza is now en route, and straightened times for banana lovers. That's BBC NewsHour at 9 on WNYC.
Coming up today on the Brian Lehrer Show, what's next for the Museum of Chinese in America? Michael Lee, the incoming president, discusses the future of the museum. Recently, an unlikely site of protest over the city's borough-based jail program. That's coming up at 10 this morning right here on WNYC. And coming up in a few minutes at 9 o'clock on the BBC NewsHour, the latest from Haiti as the Prime Minister plans to resign. Taking a look at your forecast now, 46 with some sunshine. Sunny today and a high of 62. It'll be gusty again, but not nearly as windy as it was yesterday. It's 8:52.
The Fed says the road to controlling inflation is bumpy, and it looks like we may have just hit another pothole.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Buyside from the Wall Street Journal. Buyside's reviews and recommendations help consumers decide how to spend their time and money at WSJ.com/Buyside. And by Schwab. Schwab offers investors choices like full-service wealth management, self-directed investing options, and trading on Thinkorswim. More at Schwab.com.
From Marketplace, I'm Sabri Benashore, in for David Brancaccio. Annual inflation for February accelerated slightly, coming in at 3.2%. Month to month, prices rose 0.4% in February, after rising 0.3% in January, after rising 0.2% in December. Not great. One saving grace, core inflation, that's when you take out volatile things like food and energy, did slow down on an annual basis, at least. Another saving grace here is that recently wages have been rising faster than inflation has been eating them up. But of course, there is a catch. Marketplace's Mitchell Hartman reports.
After prices soared in 2022, the purchasing power of wages started to catch up last year.
We've seen an improvement in consumers' finances really over the last 6 months when real wage growth turned positive.
Economist John Lear at polling firm Morning Consult says this benefited high earners first.
They were not as much in debt as some of the middle and low income folks.
It's been harder for those households to afford higher food, rent, and gas prices without getting into debt. And even with wages rising, they've been playing catch up.
And that's largely because they are paying elevated interest rates. Once you go down the wrong end of the credit cycle, it's tough to work your way out.
Meanwhile, on average, Americans are working fewer hours than they were last year and in 2019, says Liv Wang at payroll processor ADP.
We see higher wage growth since the recovery, but if people are working less, their total earnings can still be less than inflation.
ADP finds weekly work hours are down for women and for the highest earners, but low-income workers and men are still putting in at least as many hours as before the pandemic. I'm Mitchell Hartman for Marketplace.
New York Community Bank, the latest mid-sized bank that's run into trouble, says it's got a lifeline. It has sealed a deal with a group of investors who have now provided $1 billion in capital to the bank. The optimistic view on Wall Street is that this will help NYCB deal with its mounting problems. NYCB shares are up about 2.5% this morning, pre-market trading. Marketplace's Nova Safo has more.
The FAA has said its safety audit found multiple instances of manufacturing problems on the MAX assembly line, but it hasn't released details. The New York Times is reporting that of the inspections the FAA conducted, Boeing failed about a third of them, and its contractor Spirit Aerosystems, which manufactures the MAX fuselage, failed about half. In one instance, the Times reports, the FAA found a Spirit mechanic using a hotel keycard to check a door seal. In another, mechanics used liquid Dawn soap as a lubricant on a door seal. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, whose department includes the FAA, yesterday told reporters that Boeing must make a serious transformation of its safety and manufacturing practices. The FAA has given Boeing 90 days to come up with an action plan for improvements. The agency is among 3 federal entities investigating Boeing. The others are the National Transportation Safety Board and, according to the Wall Street Journal, the Justice Department. I'm Nova Safo for Marketplace.
All right, let's do the numbers. Dow, S&P, and NASDAQ futures are all up in the 3 to 0.8% range, with Dow futures up 127 points. The yield on the 10-year Treasury is 4.113%. Reddit is getting ready to become a publicly traded company. The social media platform is looking to raise almost $750 million in an initial public offering of its common stock. It's also reserving nearly 1.8 million shares for users and moderators. More on that at marketplace.org.
Marketplace Morning Report is supported by Baird. Baird strives to attract and retain top financial professionals, providing stability and continuity of advice for clients across market environments. More information at BairdDifference.com. And by Affinity, provider of the CRM for the private capital relationship economy. Affinity knows who has the best relationship with the right startup. Affinity.co/marketplace.
For the federal government, the 2024 fiscal year started in October of last year. I mentioned that only to point out that some of the funding for that year didn't make it through Congress and to the president's desk until only last weekend. Now that it has, people are sifting through the details and the earmarks. Marketplace's Kimberly Adams has more.
Earmarks are sort of like footnotes on funding bills, promising to spend money on specific projects requested by individual members of Congress. Earmarks were banned for about a decade after some high-profile scandals and examples of waste. But since they were brought back a few years ago,
there's a requirement to demonstrate community support for projects, which didn't exist in the past. For-profit organizations, companies are not eligible to receive them.
Michael Thorning is Director of Structural Democracy at the Bipartisan Policy Center.
There's an overall cap on the amount of money that Congress can direct in this way. And the system that we have now is the most transparent that it has ever been in our history.
You can go to the House Appropriations Committee website and find lists of earmarks as well as who requested them. According to an analysis by Bloomberg Government, in this latest package, there are more than 6,000 earmarks, totaling more than $12 billion. That's less than 3% of the total spending package for things like
infrastructure projects, help for police, affordable housing.
Diana Evans is a professor emerita of political science at Trinity College and has studied earmarks for decades. She says in this batch,
for Republicans, it tends to be more large infrastructure projects. So actually, Republican spending is greater than Democratic spending on earmarks because of the size of the projects that they're earmarking.
Even with the new rules, there's still a lot of politicking when it comes to earmarking.
The closer you are to the seat of power, the more likely you are to get earmarks. So appropriators writing the bills get more earmarks than people not writing the bills.
Joshua Sewell is Director of Research and Policy at Taxpayers for Common Sense.
And also we're seeing people who are in tough elections tend to get earmarks as opposed to folks who are in safe districts.
Because whether a member of Congress voted for the final package or not, money for any earmarks they slipped in will still end up in their districts.
From APM, American Public Media.
WNYC is supported by Mount Sinai.